Hey everyone, so we have actually had a LG C9 OLED firmware update over the past few days. I think mine actually came through 3 days ago, but I've just not had chance to actually film anything on it. I did have a quick look through the actual TV itself just to see if I could actually spot anything. No new features or anything like that, so what we'll do is we'll go through this sort of official, unofficial changelog for what they've actually listed for this particular firmware update. So the only official listing is actually the Apple AirPlay functionality improvement. So essentially they've probably made it a little bit more reliable, made it show up a bit more easier. I've not really ever used AirPlay as such to the LG C9 because obviously you've got everything built in. I've got an Apple TV connected to it anyway, and generally I don't really use AirPlay that much because of the fact that I'll only AirPlay well, it'll only cast in 1080p, and most of the stuff I consume is generally 4K. So for that reason, the AirPlay itself isn't really much of an issue for me. The HomeKit is more of an issue, so I'm hoping that behind the scenes they've also made some tweaks just to make the HomeKit more reliable as well. Although, having said that, I've never actually had an issue with the HomeKit itself, apart from when this update actually went through, where it actually disappeared, and essentially what I had to do was turn stuff off and back on before it then recognized the TV. So basically, if I just scroll down and come into my list, as you can see, I always have the TV just there. So what actually happened is when this update actually kicked in, that disappeared from there initially, so I had to basically disable everything, turn stuff off, and then once I booted everything back up again, it was showing up again. And I don't think, let's just have a look, in fact, I don't think functionality seems exactly the same. So it literally just gives you your sources on there. You've got power, you can obviously control the sources as well as the power on and off from Siri, so you can literally just give voice gestures and it'll do it that way. Coming down to, obviously, as it says there, everything below this point is basically unofficial, and it's been extracted from the actual firmware itself. So web OS version updated to 4.8.0. Device codec capability configuration for EAC3 codec changed from 6 to 8 channels, so that's obviously a good thing. EAC3, I'm not sure how many sources or devices applications actually make use of EAC3. I believe this was a similar thing that actually came to Infuse on the Apple TV, where they got Atmos support. So I'm not sure whether this is their equivalent of literally giving Atmos support to that particular codec, but obviously it limits it to that particular codec. So I'm not sure how widely used that particular codec is with regards to the applications installed on the LG TV itself. The next one is the device codec capability configuration for Lpcm. Similarly again, so this one's actually had quite a big bump, so it's gone from stereo sound up to 8 channels. So I'm guessing that's going to be a 7.1, but obviously it doesn't really give details in terms of what it actually does. But obviously that's quite a big bump for pass-through. Now, just on pass-through, obviously because that's listed and it says via eARC, I did actually do a quick test to see whether my C9 will actually pass through to my LG SL10YG. The SL10YG obviously is not eARC, it's only a ARC port. So unfortunately, all the tests that I did with any Atmos content that I could actually find, it still doesn't actually show up on the soundbar itself as Dolby Atmos. So essentially, to me at the moment, maybe it may be down to the equipment that I have, but at the moment obviously that's not actually making much of a difference in terms of that particular scenario. But hopefully, obviously, for the long run, if you do upgrade, there's a possibility I might actually upgrade to the SN11RG somewhere down the line. So in that scenario I could obviously repeat this test, and hopefully at that point we are getting correct pass-through for 8 channels. The next one is the list of CA certificates was updated. Not really sure what that relates to. Media server 8K video playback support added, so obviously it's not going to be able to actually output 8K natively, but obviously it can downsample it or downscale it to the 4K. So this is obviously them looking more long term, and that's obviously where the HDMI 2.1, the full HDMI 2.1 benefit comes in. The fact that you can now get possibly the very best out of any 2019 TV and possibly even some 2020 TVs in terms of downscaling or down sampling 8K content, which obviously this isn't anything that's going to be happening right now. This is obviously looking well into the future, possibly next gen gaming, once that actually kicks it up to 8K, and also 8K content, movies, TV shows, that kind of stuff, once it actually does become more readily available, which you're probably looking a minimum possibly 4 years, 3-4 years minimum, I'd say, before you get anything sort of mainstream coming to 8K. So not something that'll affect anybody right now, but obviously in the long run, any updates are beneficial. The next one is max size of EPG, so that's increased. Now the EPG itself, I don't use satellite or terrestrial channels, so that doesn't really affect me. I've got no way of actually testing that. AirPlay application was added to the list of apps that are kept alive, so that's obviously a good thing, because a lot of these kind of devices, Fire TV Stick for example, that has the capability of doing AirPlay. However, you have to have the app running at the time, whereas the way you want it is similarly to how the Apple TV does it natively, where it's always active. So you literally, as if the TV is on, then it gives you the option to AirPlay to it. So that's obviously something that is quite important, the fact that they have added that to make sure it's always live, so whenever you need to AirPlay it, you're not then having to do an extra step in order to actually make use of that. Built-in app update, so web browsers obviously been updated, and LG advertisement app updated. Below that, the modules, Wi-Fi, audio, and HDMI 2.1. So as you can see, a fair few changes. Nothing, as I said, I had a little play about with the TV before I actually came to filming this particular video, because I wanted to see if there was any hidden tweaks, any sort of picture improvements, anything like that I could actually notice, possibly any extra menus, any extra functionality in terms of burn-in mitigation, anything like that, but everything else stayed the same. Now there was actually one downside, I've kind of touched on that already with regards to the HomeKit, but what actually happened is, as you will have seen from my videos in the past, I've actually had my NAS drive connected, well not connected, but seen by the TV, so the TV could actually see all the media on my NAS drive, and I could actually play back everything, and in some cases play it back better than using dedicated devices such as my Apple TV. I was able to play back actual Dolby Atmos and DTS tracks directly through the TV, and a lot of times they actually played back better than what it was doing on via Infuse on the Apple TV 4K. However, what happened was, as this update happened, and as I say, this could be a case of everything just needing to shut down, but my NAS drive wasn't actually being picked up, and Plex couldn't recognize it. It still had the listings there, so it could still see what I was trying to load, but it couldn't actually load it. And then when you go into the photos and videos app, it basically disappeared. So it's normally the one on the far left, and that option was just completely gone. Now I had to basically reboot my whole NAS drive and change a few settings in order to get it to show up again. Now I don't know whether this is related to the firmware update, but the only time I've actually noticed this is since that firmware update kicked in. So that's something that obviously for other people out there, it's not something that is permanent, it's not something that is detrimental in terms of the long run and removing functionality, because initially that's what I thought. I thought LG had actually pulled a fast one and removed DLNA functionality from the TV in order to get people to upgrade to the CX. Thankfully that's not the case, and it may just be a bug where things just needed re-adding. Like I think I went into some of the apps and it was a similar thing where it almost seemed as though stuff had been reset after the firmware update, and you just needed to trigger it again in order to get it to recognize everything that was there. So for that reason, obviously, if anybody else has a similar setup where they're using a NAS drive, what you may have to do is just switch the NAS drive off or reboot it as I did, and then just go back in and rerun your indexing. So that's what I had to do for Plex in order to show up, which is strange because on my phone at the time everything was showing up fine, but on the TV Plex as well as the photos and videos app, it wasn't able to find anything. So basically all I had to do was just go into my NAS drive, and this will be different for everybody, so I'm not going to actually show you how I did mine unless you have a Synology NAS, because it won't be the same process, but essentially what you have to do is the same. So firstly, obviously just try giving it a reboot, because generally that will get everything to refresh anyway. But what you may also have to do is something called indexing. So that's basically how Plex actually recognizes new content, and what you need to do is just do a manual re-index, and that will basically just scan all your files again, and it will pull up all the media, and it will get rid of any listings that you might have for media that you've deleted since the previous time it actually indexed all your files. So essentially, when you go into Plex and it gives you all your movies and your TV shows, some of those TV shows won't actually be on your NAS drive any longer, but because the NAS drive hasn't actually re-indexed the files, the image will still be there. So when you click on it, obviously nothing will play, but for all intents and purposes, your NAS thinks that it's, or sorry, the Plex app thinks that it's still there because it's not been told otherwise. So that might be something that you might need to do. But other than that, I haven't noticed any issues, no reliability issues, anything like that. It has been in constant use. My son's used it constantly since then, and I've watched a few TV shows, YouTube, and a movie or two as well. So in terms of functionality, reliability, speed, everything like that, there's nothing else that I can actually notice that has actually changed on the TV itself. So no detrimental effects from that point of view, and also no real speed improvements or anything like that either. But obviously this is something that in the long run, these kind of little incremental updates, especially on the audio side, which for me personally, I think would actually be more beneficial in the long run, because obviously as eARC becomes a lot more readily available on the soundbar side of things, I'm seeing that all the receivers have been slowly and gradually all getting updates to support eARC, even some where they originally came only supporting ARC, despite having 2.1 capability. So a lot of those I've seen threads on stuff getting updated and supporting eARC capability. So for that, obviously the more they actually update this and improve things, the better. And obviously it shows that in the long run, even though I've purchased this recently, the TV essentially is a 29 TV, and the fact that you're getting a update essentially after the 2020 versions come out is a good sign for LG, and I think it goes a little way to actually repairing some of their reputation after the whole scandal with regards to the DTS and the 40 gigabits per second HDMI scenario with regards to the CX. So I think this does actually go a little way in terms of repairing that a little for them and just bringing it back. I mean, I've seen on threads constantly on the net where people have had previous TVs and they've been crying out for years and years. Some people even posting comments saying they'll never buy an LG again because of the fact that known issues don't get rectified. And to an extent that is still the case, because the Dolby Vision blacks issue that is affecting the CX, so the raised blacks on Dolby Vision mode whenever you're watching movies and shows and stuff like that, at the moment there's a bug where you're getting raised blacks, and apparently I've not actually experienced this myself, but some people do report that the same issue actually occurred with the C9 as well as the CX. It's just become a lot more prevalent and been noticed more, seeing as people have actually tested it on the newest TV, and they were assuming that this would have been something that was fixed, but apparently this was raised all the way back on the C9. Whether they can fix it or not, people have claimed that yeah, this is just a firmware issue, and there are calibrators out there who have actually rectified this by making changes to the service menu, simple changes as well, literally just changing your white point settings and things like that. So it's not something that I would assume would be impossible for LG to fix. However, whether that's at the top of their priority list or not, considering that it would actually make the C9 even more attractive to buyers, it may come down to a business decision, and whether that's a good or bad thing, obviously that's for everybody else to decide. For me personally, from a consumer point of view, I would obviously want maximum support, but I don't expect every company out there to perform in the same ways as some of the better ones. So for example, for me personally, being in the Apple ecosystem, one of the things that actually keeps me in that is the fact that you get so much support so many years after a device has actually been produced. So for example, you've got the iPhone SE, probably about 5 years old now, and it's still getting software updates. That's something that LG have been criticized for in the past, the fact that they don't continue, or basically they never give you substantial upgrades or firmware updates over the years, and it's literally just little things that or behind the scenes, or it'll make it look as though you're getting updates, and it makes it look as though they're doing something to improve your experience with that particular device. But in reality, they're not actually doing the things that people are crying out for, the things that affect the picture quality. In this case, obviously they have looked at the audio side of things, and hopefully there will be people that will actually benefit from that. As I say, the EAC3 in particular, I'm not sure how many apps actually utilize that, so how useful that is, we'll see. Lpcm, in theory, a lot more people will actually be making use of that. A lot of the comments on my channel state that they generally have their setup utilizing PCM essentially. So, and obviously the pass-through thing has been an issue. So with all that said, obviously you guys out there who've got C9s, anybody, if you do notice anything else, or if you notice any of these particular updates actually improving your setup, obviously do post down in the comments below. If you haven't already done so, please do subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be notified about any new up and coming videos that I post. Thanks very much for watching.